Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today I'll be reviewing the new Lorde album, Virgin. The fourth album from the New Zealand singer-songwriter is finally here, and especially after her interesting, to say the least, run of albums before this, my expectations for this album were actually quite mixed. Given how in 2021 we saw Lorde have one of the biggest fall-offs in the history of pop music, releasing her third album, Solar Power, which to be honest was one of the most boring and uninspired pop albums I've ever heard, and to be honest almost felt like an insult to her previous two albums, both of which are incredible, with the lyricism, the songwriting, the performances, and everything all just being so lazy and completely devoid of any creative passion, which makes it an especially frustrating album given that its predecessor, Melodrama, is still to this day one of my absolute favourite albums of all time, with everything that I just mentioned being some of the worst parts of Solar Power or all the best parts of Melodrama. So having such an insane gap in quality between these two albums of course made the expectations for this one very difficult to predict. But now that this new album is here, and I've listened to it of course multiple times, I am happy to report that Solar Power was just a one-off. And while Virgin isn't quite up to Melodrama standards, I can easily forgive it for that given that there are very few albums in the world by any artist that are quite up to Melodrama standards. And on the whole, I am very happy to see Lorde for the most part back on form. Virgin sees an amazing return to the very beautiful and lush production that is so present on Melodrama, as well as genuinely incredible lyricism. Being easily one of my favourite things about Melodrama is just how Lorde is able to present seemingly petty teen drama through such a mature lens, and is able to get you so invested in her love stories and her drama and the goings-on of all the stories that she tells in her lyrics, which again is something that, while not quite up to the incredible quality of Melodrama, is something that she still does very well on Virgin. Hammer is quite a strong start to the album, being quite a subtle song but still having a lot of things I love about it, most notably with the piano during the intro definitely being one of those. Despite this track's simplicity for pretty much its whole runtime, I still absolutely love the build-up into the chorus, as well as the outro, which just does an incredible job at building on the previous parts of the song, and then creating such a satisfying end. The vocals as well, which is consistently has to be one of my favourite things about the entire project, are just incredible, with Lorde just singing with so much passion, which is always, I think, something that she's been incredibly good at. What Was That, I think, is just a classic-sounding Lorde song, being the first of many on this project that do sound very reminiscent of Melodrama. And I think that this callback to Melodrama also comes through a lot on the lyrics, which seem to describe a relationship that she really felt like was worth something but was not a feeling that was reciprocated, which on the surface does just seem like a pretty generic teen drama love song. But again, like I've mentioned, Lorde is incredible at presenting it in such a mature way that doesn't come across as cheesy or immature. And combine that with the absolutely incredible synthpop textures of the whole song, and it really is no wonder that this track was chosen to be the lead single. Shapeshifter, despite being a much calmer track, does fit in really well where it goes, and does sound incredible off the back of What Was That. I absolutely love the use of strings on this song, which is not something that we've seen Lorde do all that much of in the past. And so I always love to hear artists expanding their sound, especially in ways that not only complement their already established style, but it's always incredible when they manage to do such a good job at it already. And I think that in the case of this song, the strings being one of the defining features just works so well. The vocals on this track as well are of course incredible and so soft, which really works. And of course another one of my favourite features of this track just has to be the way that synths are used. They're very simple but still so consistent and atmospheric. Man of the Year is a really nice and simple heartfelt ballad, maybe just a little bit too simple, especially in its first half. It does kind of feel like it's just lacking something a little bit, but luckily it does progress reasonably well that kind of takes it out of that rut that it's in for the first half. The way it progresses does feel somewhat unnatural, but by the time I get to the end of the track it's just so unpredictable and using so many unconventional instruments and ideas that overall it is still one of my favourite moments on the album, even if the song as a whole isn't quite as good. Favourite Daughter is definitely one of the most emotional songs on the album, and again I think both sonically and lyrically is very comparable to Melodrama. The chorus is so lush and complex, and again there are just so many unconventional sounds and ideas being thrown about, at least for Lorde's usual standards. And I think that despite the big contrasts, her very breathy vocals on this track actually mix in really well too. Current Affairs starts off as somewhat of a predictable pop song, however it does stray away from that pretty quickly. And I think that despite the lack of sound changes and small palette of instruments, it still has a really unique and captivating build-up, and I love how that just shows Lorde's ability to manage to do so much with so little. And I think that some of the auto-tuned backing vocals on this track are maybe a little bit unnecessary, but they're easy enough to ignore. Clear Blue is a quick and simple a cappella interlude that I actually think, off of the back of such a progressive track, does actually sound quite good, with the two tracks almost, for whatever reason, feel like they're somewhat connected, at least sonically. Grown Woman, as the title suggests, does see how Lorde has matured a lot with her lyricism, featuring what I think are some of her most interesting and creative metaphors yet, and how she seems to use those to tell stories of how she has overcome a lot of her struggles throughout her life and got her to where she is now. The vocals, as well as the slow building of the atmosphere, are so incredible and euphoric, as well as this track featuring some of the absolute best production of Lorde's entire career. Broken Glass is almost somewhat of a dance-leaning track with a lot of the very subtle synth sounds that are used, and in a way almost feels like she's trying to allude to maybe a Charlie XCX sounding kind of album in the future, which is not something I would be opposed to at all. And again, I absolutely, of course, love the vocals and the vocal harmonies on this track that really just brings so much soul to it. If She Could See Me Now, in a way, is somewhat of a formulaic pop song, with there being very little in particular that I can point to that is that amazing about it. However, it's not exactly awful either and still fits into the album quite well. Of course, it does have incredible vocals and production, although nothing really new there. And overall, I think it's just a decent enough bridging track that flows reasonably well from its neighbouring songs. And then the closing track, David, has this really nice simple open, however does end up actually building really well. And once again, I think more than anything, my favourite thing about this track just has to be how Lorde continues to further prove herself to be such an incredibly talented and versatile vocalist, with how simple so much of this track is and how she's able to still do so much with it. I really do find it to be relieving that this album is so good, given that there was a small part of me that really thought that Melodrama might have just been a one-off, especially after Solar Power, and the very large gaps that she often takes between her albums. There definitely was an element of it feeling like that she was never really going to do anything quite even close to that level ever again. And so I'm so relieved to finally have the closure of knowing that that is not the case, and Lorde is still capable of making incredible albums when she clearly wants to. And I think that Virgin is definitely one of her most consistent projects yet, with the incredible vocals, production, and even a lot of unconventional instrumentation on a handful of the songs. And so with all of that being said, this album is going to get an 8 out of 10 from me. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.